But let's dive into the show, Matt. You ready? Because we have this story, and I'm sure people have heard about this, but we wanted to make sure that we're highlighting it and talking about it on this program, giving a little bit of our analysis on it. Which is this horrific story right here out of Texas with this abortion law, which is one of the most disgusting, draconian, nasty, hate-filled abortion bans in the country. The way that it not only denies people access to healthcare and medical treatment that they need, but also directly puts doctors and healthcare workers under threat is truly disgusting. And we'll get into some of the aspects of that in just a second. But just to sort of set the table, I think most people may have heard about this story, but if you haven't, we're going to be talking about Kate Cox, who has been caught into this disgusting net of Texas's near total abortion ban. Now, before we really get into this case, there's just two things I really want to establish up front. One is Kate Cox is already a mother of two, wanted to become pregnant, and wanted to have this child. But the fetus was diagnosed with Edwards syndrome, which made the pregnancy non viable and also put Ms. Cox at incredible risk to her own health, her life, and her future capacity to have children. That's one. Two, the second thing is that you should not know who Kate Cox is. The public should not know her personal tragedy, her health conditions, her personal medical conversations with doctors, and what she intends to do about this absolutely heart rate wrenching and devastating moment. I mean, I feel so much for this woman and for her family and for everything that they're going through to not only be denied the medical care that she needs, but to also be made into a kind of public spectacle. I was seeing today online just like these absolute freaks on Twitter and X commenting on her medical case as if some jackass in Western Michigan, has any right to say or opine about what kind of medical care this woman deserves. It's just a truly, truly disgusting moment. I think you really have to front load that here is that this isn't a story that anyone should be engaged with except for her and her doctor and her family, right? But we know this. Um, and we know about this law in Texas. We know about the devastating effects. She is not the first person to be put up into this difficult and dangerous situation by this devastating law here. But we know about this kind of aspect of this law, which is set up, frankly, to punish and harass and humiliate women, and the GOP has been dead set for a long time on denying Americans basic rights to health care. The Democratic Party has played politics with Roe v. Wade for generations. And because the Texas GOP, in addition to being cruel in their intent, are also some of the laziest, thoughtless politicians out there, these guys regularly struggle to put together a coherent and workable legislation, dropping whether or not we think the intent of what they're trying to do is good or bad. They create these kind of laws that are fueled by hatred and bigotry and antisocial reasonings, but they are also become a nightmare in practice, both because, again, the intent behind the laws and the lack of thought when it comes to actually crafting what the text of these laws says. Because like so much of Texas GOP politics, they want their law to ban abortions in the state of Texas, but they also wanted their soundbite too. Right? They wanted to be able to say when asked, oh, no, of course there'll be exceptions in medical situations. Well, the whole country is watching right now how that is not the fucking case. Just a quick breakdown of the timeline for folks who haven't been following this. Kate Cox finds out the devastating news that her pregnancy is not viable. In order to comply with this law, her doctor asked permission from the court to provide necessary medical treatment. Again, absolutely absurd to having to be able, to be consulting with the court or consulting with
Exactly. I mean, this is the problem is like what this should not this should not involve courts. This is a medical thing. What and it's like especially insulting that we don't even have like a state right to health insurance. Like
Mhm.
it's just fucking appalling. Like how often like does the small government party get to play that card when they're the ones putting literal fucking judges between women and their doctors and medical procedures or like it's appalling.
No, the denial of healthcare here, the spectacle that comes with something like that is absolutely disgusting. The harassment that this person is facing, the harassment that the medical professionals around her are facing too, is
The
absolutely
jeopardy,
disgusting.
the
The
health jeopardy. Yeah.
and just getting into that a little bit. So a Travis County judge rules that this abortion can happen, that this necessary medical care can happen. And Ken Paxton, again, recently getting out of an impeachment trial, instead of heading to his favorite hotel to get a massage or visiting his mistress under pseudonym, decides to work a bit of overtime this weekend and pleads with the Texas Supreme Court to overrule this Travis County judge and continue the harassment of this woman. The Texas Supreme Court rules unanimously that this abortion will be blocked. And now Kate Cox's lawyer has announced that Miss Cox will leave the state to get the medical attention that she needs. Shame on all of these elected officials, from the legislature to the Attorney General Ken Paxton and to the elected members of the Texas Supreme Court, for taking the time out of their day with all the things that are happening in this state right now to harass and harm this woman going through one of the most difficult things imaginable. Now, I have a little bit of text here from the ruling from the Supreme Court, Matt, that I was going to read out to folks because I think it really highlights, again, the cruelty of the decision from the Supreme Court, but also just like the irrationality baked into this law to ban abortion in the state of Texas in the first place. Quote, this is from the Supreme Court's ruling saying that this woman cannot get an abortion. Quote, a pregnant woman does not need a court order to have a life-saving abortion in Texas. Full of shit already here, right? Our ruling today does not block a life-saving abortion in this very case if a physician determines that one is needed under the appropriate legal standard using reasonable medical judgment. If Mrs. Cox's circumstances are or have become those that satisfy the statutory exemption, no court order is needed. Nothing in this opinion prevents a physician from acting if, in that physician's reasonable medical judgment, she determines that Ms. Cox has a, quote, life-threatening physical condition that places her at risk of death or poses serious risk of substantial impairment of a major bodily function unless the abortion is performed or induced. Already here, we're full of shit. Already here, we're full of shit because already a doctor says this pregnancy, one, is not viable, but also poses a direct threat to the health and safety of Miss Cox. One, to her direct life and also to her future ability to have children. Again, a, quote, major bodily function unless the abortion is performed or induced. Now, I'm not a lawyer, Matt, so of course I'm going to go into this with a little bit of humility.
Are doctors?
Kind of like how these
lawyers?
folks aren't fucking doctors either.
Yeah.
And that's sort of exactly the point that we're at in this state. What doctor, or even the even more risk adverse hospital in the state of Texas wants to take on the massive penalties outlined in the Texas anti-abortion law if a Paxton or the Texas Supreme Court decides to come after them after the fact? The answer is simple. They're not. They're not going to do it because they do not want to face those penalties. And in fact, before the Texas Supreme Court came out with their ruling, the Attorney General's office of the state of Texas contacted 3 different hospitals in the state before the Supreme Court made their ruling, threatening them that if they perform medical care on this woman in an emergency situation, they could face stark punishment. So all of this kind of weasel word nonsense that we're getting from the elected Texas Supreme Court here is absolute bullshit. They did note that there is a problem with this law. Well, great. Saying, quote, in the ruling, the courts cannot go further by entering into the medical judgment arena. Again, full of shit here. We're sitting.
It's too late. You're already in the arena. You shouldn't be there at all. You should be out fucking side, like looking at the score, like the fucking display board showing the score. But the whole point of this legislation was to put them in the arena.
100%.
With the ability to ruin the careers. It's not even like they're just in the stands. They're like ready to maim the players.
And they go on to say the Texas Medical Board, however, can do more to provide guidance in response to any confusion that currently prevails. Again, what fucking world are we in where we're going to sit here and say, the Texas Medical Board basically isn't doing enough. Look, whatever. Put out some guidelines and things like that to help people feel a little bit more confident in providing healthcare to folks. The fucking problem right now is the courts and the politicians.
Yeah, but like the existence of like guidelines on this are not necessary in this world. This is not an actual issue where doctors are willy-nilly doing abortions, right? Like this
Mhm.
sort of thing shouldn't even this should there should not be any, there's no extra care needed here. This shouldn't even be a consideration politically. This is something doctors already got fucking covered. And yet,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, so we'll come together with some more guidelines. I'm sure those are going to be frictionless. I'm sure those are not going to trip up anywhere and ruin somebody else's fucking life.
Well, also because at the end of the day, the court, because again, effectively, that's what they were doing in this ruling is saying, hey, what we got from this doctor wasn't actually an explicit call. That they were saying, oh, this is my judgment, and they're saying the standard is like inarguable fact, right?
Yeah,
And let's also
that
look at
sounds great.
who these
Right.
folks who are making this kind of judgment. This is Texas Supreme Court Justice Devine, um, who is one of these people ruling on this. What kind of medical judgment do you think that he would find acceptable for there to be healthcare in the state of Texas? This is him talking during his election campaign.
And ladies and gentlemen, I want to submit to you that before I ever got in politics, my convictions were forged in the crucibles of the pro-life movement. I ran into a bunch of crazy Catholics, and they talked me into rescuing at abortion clinics. And I rescued in San Austin and Corpus Christi and was arrested 37 times. Now, isn't it an irony that today I stand before you as one who could very well win the Texas Supreme Court?
So,
Yeah.
what kind of medical argument do you think you need to put up in front of somebody like that? It's Looney
Yeah.
Tune bullshit to sit here and treat this with any kind of credence or reasonableness.
Right, right, exactly. And all these judges, all these politicians acting like law, like I'm sorry, law is a fucking joke compared to medicine. And I'll also just say, very appropriate that we had Aina Muhammad on this week with all these fucking fundamentalists and the way they make a mockery of a Republican form of government. Like this
Mhm.
shit is, I mean, yeah, because I mean, I can't. I remember downtown Fargo, my entire undergrad going to JL Beers on Main Street. Right next door was the Red River Women's Clinic. And always in front of that were these fucking assholes like that guy, the crazy Catholics. They're thinking they were saving people's lives, and actually, what they were doing were harassing young women or women just in general, trying to get reproductive health. And I fucking hate those people. I don't like, this is a Michael Brooks, a sort of anniversary, and he always, wants to be kind with people. I fucking draw the line there. Maybe it's too close to home.
I'm sure he
Fuck
would
those
agree with you
people.
too, friend.
I'm sick of
Yeah.
those fucking people. I fucking they're lucky that they've gotten off easy, is what I'll say.
And again, as we were just talking about, what has become so basically, like here's the end line here is one, this poor woman had to go through not only one of the most difficult experiences of her life, difficult enough to find out that a wanted child is not viable, that is a threat to your life. That devastating news is just unimaginable, and I feel so sad and devastated for her to then be put through this from not only the kind of public spectacle of it, for the indignity in the first place of having to sort of petition the courts to get medical treatment, um, but to go through an experience of getting a judgment from a Travis County judge that you were going to be able to get the necessary medical treatment, and then having the Attorney General of the state pulling in overtime shifts to make sure that you don't, is truly disgusting. And then we know the makeup of this court and how they ended up ruling. Um, the expanded aspect of this, outside of even just the question of healthcare regarding to abortion, is what is going on in the state of Texas when it comes to medical professionals who work with women and in pregnancy in general. This is just one of the many stories I highly suggest on this. Was in Slate. The title is by Sophie Novak, called "You Know What? I'm Not Doing This Anymore," and it breaks down the flight of so many OBGYNs and medical professionals in the state of Texas because of the threats that they're under, right? Because of the difficulty of providing care in the state. Again, and in this case specifically, the artificial and bigoted and nasty and anti-human legislation But before any of this shit, Texas was already one of the most difficult states in the country to have a child because of the underfunding of healthcare, because of the poverty that exists in the state. So all of these people in the state, who already needed to be served better by the medical system than they were, we're now seeing outflux of people from the state of Texas, qualified people from the state of Texas, because they say that they can't put their lives, their family lives, and their future at risk to perform medicine in this state, all because a bunch of Republican politicians want to, again, have their anti-abortion law and have their soundbite too, because it's
Yeah.
extremely clear that there's no real thought into it. And I'd be disappointed with, obviously, an abortion ban that had a very well crafted, exemption and exception aspect to it. But the fact is that the worst case scenario is to have an abortion ban and to also have this quagmire joke disaster of an exemption, which, as we are all seeing, everyone in this country, everyone in this state is seeing very, very clearly does not exist in the state of Texas.
Yeah, and that exodus of OBGYNs is not just a Texas problem.
Mm-mm.
CBS News had an article Halloween this year. Idaho's restricted abortion laws are fueling an exodus of OBGYNs, with more than half of those who specialize in high risk pregnancies expected to leave the state by the end of the year. So, all this fucking shit about how much Republicans care about the middle of the country thing. Like, again, we're seeing they're going to get people killed. And I mean, I know somebody who was, when I knew her when I was younger, anti choice, and unfortunately had a miscarriage. And that procedure, as we turned out, as like we discovered with Kate Cox, is the same procedure actually as an abortion. A DNC is, I can't forget what it actually stands for. And you know what? That changed her perspective, because not she did going through that shit did not want to all of a sudden get on the fucking phone with Earl Pomeroy's office or Byron Dorgan or John Hoven or whoever the fuck to say, hey, can you let this podunk doctor, who's feeling a little bit skittish because he's like a 60-year-old, that's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you don't like, that's friction. You don't want that. That serves no purpose. The only purpose that this has been inserted into anyone's lives is hysterical campaign mongering by a Republican Party that needs it to win elections. This is not a real problem. Late term abortions, all that shit is just hysterical anti women bullshit to try to whip people up into a frenzy. And yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to have it'd be nice to have a more forceful response to it than like this occasional good politician. You take the fight here, but in large part, a Democratic Party that is actually just looking at it as money in the bank next election,
Mm-hmm.
so you can fundraise on it.
Yeah, a lot of unfortunate weak language around this, I will say.
Yeah.
Um, but folks, and we're going to continue covering this and continue this fight, because this is, um, obviously a lot of the focus has to be on the Republican Party and the formation that sort of creates these dynamics. As Jules is saying there, though, again, already a number of women have died, and you're hearing pretty horrible whispers of some of the things that people are having to do in this state to be able to get medical care, and it's extremely dangerous and dark. Um, but it also means that this kind of wishy-washy political fight against the right is just unacceptable at this point. Because this, you could call it a ticking time bomb or something like this, but this is something that's been announced for decades, that this was around the corner. And there was a complacency and a willingness to fundraise on it, an entire um, financial nonprofit operation around it, certainly a political fundraising operation around sort of holding up abortion as something under threat instead of actually finishing that fight once and for all.